My question for you is, why are you here? Can I get some feedback? I'm just going to jot some notes up here so that we make sure we cover what it is that you're wanting to get out of this training. Who'd like to go first? Paul?
I've been under stress for so many years. I want to try and de-stress as I go into my retirement years, where my health that I'm jeopardizing away from stress, burnout, I can recover some of it.
That's excellent. Because we know that the top 6 reasons for death are typically related to chronic stress. Yeah, so that's good, including suicide. So de-stress as you retire, as you go into your twilight years, right? Who else? Who else would like to? Amanda?
I want to be able to not worry so much about work when I'm at home and home when I'm at work.
Ooh, I like that. Can I summarize that into being present with where you are at? Does that sound good? Okay, that's good. Who else? So like whenever you're with your family, you want to make sure that you're connecting with them. Who else? Will?
I guess how to translate that to everyone around me as well in my life.
Okay.
Because I feel like when the stress that I have in my life directly relates to others who I have close to me, my family, friends, is something along those lines, is some kind of information when it comes to that, maybe helping others with their stress that will maybe eventually help with my stress in my life.
I like that. So let me see if I'm capturing this. I'm rephrasing it back to shorten it a little bit so I can put it up here. Or you're welcome to do that as well. But basically, it's, you want to be able to help reduce stress in your own life, but also so that it impacts others, so that really the whole holistic stress level goes down for everybody. Almost like getting to a place of peace and rest in that. Does that sound?
Yes, that's exactly right.
So I said more than you did, so I didn't shorten it. So let's see. How could we say that in a way that really helps us capture that? Because that's a great point. It's really about reducing stress around me. Is that right? Others? Okay. One more. Is there anything else that somebody wants to pull out? Why you're here? Okay.
It has really trying to help patients when taking them to the dentist who come into us who are under stress, just going to the dentist, and how we can handle our own. We can try to help patients not get stressed out by the dentist.
That's a great point. So if you're coming into a dentist that's stressed out because they want to get to the next patient, and they can feel that, you can feel that. So it's really reducing stress for your own patients. Okay? Okay. So I'd like to share my personal story. So you've heard a little bit about my background, but the reason I'm passionate about this subject, counterbalancing work-life stress, is my dad was an orthodontist. So I grew up in a dental family. And I don't know how passionate you guys are about dentistry, but does anybody know what this might be? Any guesses? Sound might help you. These are all of my baby teeth. So my dad would keep these in a jar and kept it all the way through. So he was very passionate about what he did. He loved dentistry, and it gave me many opportunities. So I'm very thankful for the profession. And my dad was a tank. He was consistent about moving through things. He was getting things done all the time. He would have a legal pad where he would actually write down all of his to-do items, and then he'd methodically check them off as he went through it. And it wasn't until I realized he was kind of the example for me of what perfect life balance, work-life balance looked like, because he played with me when I was a kid growing up playing basketball and also tennis and things like that. He always had time for me. He was never at the office all the time. And so I thought, Dad's got it figured out. He exercised. He's a football player, kept up his athleticism, played tennis. But then one day I was at Chapel Hill, and I invited my parents down. We had dinner together. And my dad, after we finished having dinner, he said, you know, Audie, I just can't handle it. And he said, I just can't handle the stress. And so that night, he drove back to High Point with my mom, okay, from Chapel Hill. That's where I grew up. And he actually had, he typically would take care of himself. He'd go to sleep early if he's feeling bad to get rid of a cold or whatever. So like I said, he was like a tank. And he would always get those things done that he needed to do. He wasn't out of his practice. He was always, but he was not getting people sick for anything like that. But he went in and went into the bedroom, and my mom went upstairs and started brushing her teeth. And she heard something in the bedroom, and she ran out, and she said, honey, what's going on? And he was crumpled up in the floor. And she tried to revive my dad, and my dad had a massive heart attack that night. So that was the last time I got a chance to see him. So you don't really know when that time is going to happen because of the way stress impacts your life. To your point, it's a great one. How do you de-stress? And so the techniques and the things that I'm going to talk about today are really the laws of extraordinary success. It's how to take this out and be able to do something with it, how to make good choices around reducing stress. So now I've kind of got you in an emotional place. So what I would like to do is, first of all, do an exercise. And what the exercise is maybe there's some place in your life that, given that story that I shared with you, that might not be working at the level that you want it to. So I'd like for you to ask this question. So let me go through, first of all, what we're going to talk about. Make the 80-20 principle work for you. Eliminate the pressures that lead to burnout, and increase team engagement without increasing your stress. So ask yourself, in your personal life or in your professional life, is there some place that's just not working at the level that you want it to? I'm not saying to judge it from a perspective of, hey, this is something that somebody else might be comfortable with or they might not be comfortable with. It's really about you, okay? So it might be in an area of relationships. Maybe it's a spiritual area that you want to increase or something, whatever that looks like for you. Maybe it's relationships with your spouse, with your patients, with the people around you, your key relationships within the office. Maybe one of those things is really what, is really sticking out as the thing that you want to change. So be thinking in terms of this, because what I'd like for you to do is be able to think in terms of just choosing one thing that you're going to take away and work on. So this is really a workshop place to help you to address those things that you're talking about. Because we're going to talk about what the one thing is about, and it's a best-selling book, #1 best-selling book about how the more narrow you make your focus, the more successful and the better the outcome will be. Okay? So now I'd like for you to engage in, with me, 2019 at the GDA. Let's say we're sitting here, just the two of us, okay? And we're talking about what you've accomplished in this area, about some area of your personal life or your professional life. It could be in a relationship area. It could be a health area. Maybe it's about, specifically, how do I reduce this stress? And I'm going to do these activities around it. But tell me about what that looks like. What would be a perfect picture of a year in the future, next year at the GDA, and then think backwards. What did you overcome in the last 12 months? So they say hindsight's 20/20. So what I'd like for you to think of in terms of that is that this is really what I want my life to look like. To your point about retiring, that's a great example. Like it might be winding down the practice, like having a plan in place to retire and then knowing what my purpose is after that. What am I going to be doing in my twilight years to make it even better than the years that I've lived before? Or maybe it's, how do I work in my practice and come up with a plan that actually helps with communication within the office, with the team, so that we can actually de-stress around the things that we do day in and day out. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's an area of your personal life. It's like, I just don't put a lot of merit in focusing on exercise, some kind of a health program, or whatever that looks like for you. Okay, so just think in terms of what that looks like looking backwards. If you were to create a painted picture that was a perfect picture, what would happen 12 months looking back in our conversation? So I'd like to just take a couple of seconds to do that. And if you don't have any paper, I've got some. Does anybody need any paper to write on? Or do you guys have okay? Let's do this. Got a little bit. Does anybody else need some paper? Here we go. Everybody else good? Okay. So, as you're thinking about this perfect picture in 2019 looking back, I'd also like you to think in terms of what are the obstacles that I was able to overcome? And what are we celebrating about those overcome, what those obstacles were? Maybe it was feeling like I don't have enough time. I don't have enough resources. Maybe it's financial. Maybe it's, my mindset is not like that, to be able to see what the opportunity is to put myself in the future and get, look backwards on something that is something I want my life to look like. Maybe you've never had these conversations before and it feels kind of weird, like, what are we talking about here? And so maybe those are some of the obstacles that that you'll have to overcome to get to that place, okay? And then after we start moving along, I'm going to help you with actually a plan to be able to accomplish what it is that you're looking to do, okay? So that's going to be part of the Module 3. Final one is start thinking in terms of what are the resources that you can engage today, like what areas in your life for that particular area, be it relationship, be it your health, or be it your wealth, meaning your finances for retirement, or your practice, how to make your practice run better, getting an associate in that you want to be able to kind of lighten the load, and you're looking at transitioning your patients. Whatever that looks like, I want you to think in terms of how, am I going to be doing that, and what resources can I engage? It could be a coach, it could be a program, it could be an accountability person in your life, it could be, if it's your marriage, maybe you're thinking, wow, my spouse and I seem to be like, ships in the night at some level, so maybe it's a counselor. So just think in terms of what those resources are, maybe jot those down, and this process you can continue. We're just going to get it started today, okay? So again, what we're creating is a vision for something, and I want to give you an example of a client, one of my clients that I actually worked with, and he was a dentist, and he had this false belief around, you know what, I can't buy that luxury car. He was mid-career, and he just felt like, you know what, that's too much to spend for a car. I mean, he was making good money and everything like that, and he also came to the place of, I can't invest in myself. And I think the false mentality that he had was, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy of doing this or investing in my own growth. So he actually bought a program, and then part of taking that program was to set a goal for getting this luxury car that he always wanted. And that's what he did. He figured out a way to do it. So that's what we're going to be doing, is reverse engineering what you want your perfect life to look like, and it really helps you because it helps you gain purpose around what is it and why do I do what I do, okay? And we're going to actually create your own purpose statement, too. That's a very simple purpose statement that you can use to help you know what to say no and what to say yes to, okay? And that's what helps create and reduce the stress, reduce the chaos. Because if you know with certainty, absolute certainty, what you're going to do, what your life is about, what your purpose is, then you know that, okay, these are my priorities, and this is how I can be more productive within them, okay? And this is how I can generate a life of what I want my life to look like. So, you've heard my story, why you should care. This is about talking about making the 80-20 principle work for you. So let's go ahead and get started. What's the definition of success? Anybody have a definition of success? For yourself. Or who has a definition? You don't ask anybody, because that means there's no place for that. You say, who has a definition of success? Their definition, please. Person that's content with their life. That's great. I like that. Who else? Definition of success. Okay. We have a quiet crowd, and that's good. That's okay. Did you know that many dentists are INTJs? No, excuse me, INFJs on the Myers-Briggs personality type. So that means a lot of dentists are typically introverts. Would you guys agree with that or no? Okay. So, and that's good. We're all different. I'm an extrovert, so keep the people like me quiet, and that's a good thing sometimes too. So what I like to say is if that's the definition of success, one that I learned early on in college was Earl Nightingale's. Success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. Success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. But one of the ones that I like that Gary Keller, who wrote the book The One Thing, is that you can really tell, a kid is success is getting what you want. So even my 4-year-old knows that. Like, she acts out and she doesn't get what she wants and she's going to have a temper tantrum. She knows that success is getting what she wants. So to be successful, if you're looking at this definition, what do you have to know to be successful? With that definition of success, sorry? Absolutely, absolutely. So to be successful, you have to know what you want. So that's what we're going to define. That's why we did that exercise before of gaining clarity around that. And this is what the point is. You can, every single day, you have the choice to take either an average approach to life or an extraordinary approach to life. To basically see everything as average. In other words, there's no priority on any particular thing that gets done. So I don't know, have you guys ever had that experience where you put things in your calendar and you start thinking, why am I actually even doing this? This is not something I'm passionate about. This is not something I want to do, but I feel obligated to do. Does that make sense? So this is what we're talking about, is creating an extraordinary approach to life, where you create, in the end, as you create those base hits, you just want a few base hits to be able to get to a place of everybody consistently making home runs, because you load up the bases with base hits. You don't try to hit a home run every single time. You're just trying to do base hits every day. So what does that mean? So every single day, I work out. Every single day, I have a meditation time, and I also have time that I read the Bible and I journal. Every single day, I text my wife to just say a love note or some kind of a thing that connects us. Say, I'm proud of you. I love what you're doing. I have daddy-daughter dates with my girls, my 3-year-olds and my 7-year-old. So those are some ideas around how do I make these things better, right? So that's what we're going to be talking about. That's, in my opinion, for my life, that's the success that I want to have, and it creates an extraordinary lifestyle. Recognizing the patterns of success, Tony Robbins talked about success leaves clues. So what we're talking about here is if you do what are natural laws, like if you try the law of gravity is a natural law, bless you, and you fall off a building, you're going to get hurt because that's how laws work. Well, these are the laws of extraordinary success that we're talking about today. So what that means is if you live them and do them, you'll actually see the fruits of that to live an extraordinary life. So let's go on. So this is Gary Keller, and you guys may have heard of him. He's Keller Williams Realty. He's one of the co-founders of Keller Williams Realty, and he also co-authored the book, The One Thing. And basically what he did was they became the #1 real estate company in the world, and they're also the #1 training company in the world, and that's who I come underneath, is how I got my certification in the One Thing training. It's a system of living in the life that you dream about, of what do you want your life to look like, and being intentional about making those plans. We talked about how to be intentional whenever we're with people. Okay, so that's one of the things that we talk about, is how do I know that my focus is where I'm at, I'm meant to be there right now. And you release that. You're not looking at your phone or doing whatever that I know we a lot of times are doing multitasking. So his quote was, where I'd had huge success, I had narrowed my concentration to one thing. And where my success varied, my focus had two. So ultimately what we're doing today is narrowing that focus, just like the light. You've taken a magnifying glass and you put it on leaves, maybe when you were a kid, and you can light paper up or start a fire with the leaves or whatever. And again, if you narrow that focus even more, as you guys have done professionally, to be a specialist as you are in that profession, in that field of dentistry, then you're able to accomplish more. And so that's the whole idea behind the one thing. So let's keep going. What does this signify? Does anybody have any idea what that is? Any ideas? 1440, what does that mean? What's the semblance behind that? So that's the number of minutes in a day, okay? So whether you're Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, whoever you are, practice, at the highest level, 1,440 minutes is all we get. So the choices that we make with our time is what causes and creates that extraordinary lifestyle that we're talking about. So 1,440 minutes, it's a great equalizer. Nobody has any more or any less time. But to be proficient and to excel at whatever you're doing, you think of actors, sports figures, they all focused and narrowed their focus to a very, very narrow focus to be as successful as they've been. So by going small, it means ignoring all the things you could be doing and focusing on what you should be doing. Okay? It's realizing that extraordinary results are directly determined by how narrow you make your focus. Okay? So, has anybody know and played with dominoes before? You guys have done that before? So what happens? You knock down one 2-inch domino and it'll knock down other dominoes, right? Right? So the other thing, the research that was done is actually that you can see that one domino will knock down a domino that's 50% larger. And that is called geometric progression. It's like the compounding of interest. So what happens is, this is what it looks like. You start with a small domino, and it can ultimately continue to grow. And if you think in terms of productivity and living your life like that, we think about what is the one lead domino that I can tip over that will get me to the goal of what I want to do. So for example, that life view that you want to look back on in 2019 here, and when you're celebrating that, of being able to do what you've done in the last 12 months to get to a place of where you want to be in a relationship with your wealth, within your practice, or also within your health. This is what we're talking about. How do you find that small one domino that you can do that will start a progression that will change your life? So this is what it looks like on the reality of physics. So this is proven. If you talk about laws of extraordinary success, they're going to be laws. They're like the law of gravity. It's going to show up in a lot of different places. So this is the same thing, but it's just literally physically how that 2-inch domino, by the time it's 10, topples, knocks down 10 other dominoes, growing by 50%. You're at a place of knocking down an NFL football player, a domino that size. But as it goes to 18, what happens is you could knock down a domino the size of a Leaning Tower of Pisa. By the time it goes to 23 iterations of a domino that's growing by 50%, it will knock down the Eiffel Tower. And by the time you get to 31, a domino of that growing by 50% each time, it would be 29,300 feet. So it's actually 3,000 feet taller than 29,000 feet. That's Mount Everest is 29,000 feet. And by the time you get to a domino that's been falling and growing by 50%, you can almost reach the moon. Okay? The reason we didn't do 58 domino ticks is because you're actually in outer space, so it's hard to comprehend. So you can see that just this small one thing, knocking over the right domino and continuing to do that over time, will get you to the life and the destiny that you want to have, create the lifestyle that you want. So extraordinary success is sequential, not simultaneous. It doesn't happen all at the same time. It happens one thing at a time. The key is it's over time. You have to be consistent with it, turning it into a habit, okay? So it's one thing at a time. Who can tell me, and that's kind of cheating, who knows the 80-20 principle and who could put that in their own words? You familiar with the 80-20 principle? Yes? Pareto principle? Okay, it's really a universal principle that 80% of your results are going to be done as a result of 20% of the inputs. Also, it's the same thing with your patients probably. You guys are finding this. Maybe 20% of your patients are going to be 80% of the problems, right? So it works as a universal principle, and maybe it's not always 80-20. It could be 90-10. It could be 95-5, whatever that looks like. But that's the concept that's going on. It's where the minority actually has the majority of the output, okay? So this is an example with a to-do list. I referred to my dad about having just this long legal pad of to-do items. And so, for example, who uses a to-do list? Do you guys use that? Yeah? Electronic or paper? How does it work for you? Paper, just writing it out? Okay. Amanda? Both? Okay. Have you figured out a way that really locks it in and it works? Do you have a system that really works? No? Yeah. I'm the same way. It's frustrating. It's like the to-do list is kind of like a bane of, no, throw this away, start over again, Who else? Does anybody have a to-do list that they are happy with that works for them? Paul?
When I do is I start making this. I always do it every Friday when I'm getting off work. But I need to start doing on Saturday, Sunday, into the following week. I just listen, and then once I've listened to them, I start working on it. Then I may go back and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Prioritize.
Prioritize, make a second list.
That's excellent. Excellent. And that's what we're going to talk about is actually, to your point, is taking the items that you should do pulling it over to a list, and using that 80-20 formula of just literally narrowing down the list, okay? And then numbering, prioritizing those in number sequence. Okay, now, go ahead.
And then one other thing
Yeah.
I do sometimes is when I get ready to do it, I will actually switch to miles. In other words, if I have things I need to do around town,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm leaving on X, and I go here to the post office, and I go to the bank, but instead of saying, I need to do this, I need to do this, I go ahead and prioritize the points that I need to go to. So by the time I get around to here, I've got
I like that. So you're not doing this, going out to this, going out to this. You're actually hitting them all around almost in a sequential order. That's good. So, and I used to do that as well. I did the Stephen Covey's, Tony Robbins, Daytimer, all the different ways, and the A's and the B's and all that kind of stuff. The subtle nuance, and Paul, I hear what you're saying, and that's excellent. That's great that you do that, is that in actually pulling them out and really reducing the list and thinking, what are the things that I should do? And using what is called the focusing question, which is this question. A lot of times I would do them sequentially on what was the easiest to do so I could get a quick hit. You know what I mean? Have y'all ever done that? You've got your to-do list, and maybe you've even done this. I don't know if you've done this before. And I'm telling on myself, right? I would actually do something, then I'd write it on my list and put it down as the number that I was supposed to, that was the next number up, and then I would check it off. Have you ever done that before to feel good about it? Okay, so that's really where you're kind of really playing games with yourself. And I admit it, I'll say I was playing games with myself, okay? But here's what you do is you ask this focusing question, what's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? What's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? So what does that look like, okay? So for example, I was talking to an oral surgeon the other day, and he is actually a director on one of the national study groups. And he was talking about, my practice is going great. Everything is going fantastic. I've got a great relationship with my wife. And then he kind of leaned back in the chair, and he looked down at his stomach, and he said, but I need to work on my health, okay? Because he realized that as he was telling me all these things, there's still one area that he could improve on, that he could actually, do better than what he was doing currently. So that's what I mean when we talk about these things that are going to be helping you ultimately with wherever you want to go, okay, looking backwards. So this is extreme Pareto on anything. This could be a task list for your team, okay, for your office. This could be your personal individual task list. This could be for your family. Whatever that looks like, this is a list of either tasks, projects, outcomes, whatever that looks like at whatever level. But you can always do what's called the extreme Pareto. So we've actually said, how can we take that to the next level, where you take the Pareto principle and then you apply it to where you actually get down to just one thing, okay? And so you take 20% of the 25 or however many items, you take another 20% of those of what you should do, and then you get that down to the one item that you should do first, and you get that done first thing in the day. You might have only 15 minutes. You maybe have only 5 minutes. Whatever that looks like, maybe your one thing is going to be in an exercise place. Maybe your one thing is to connect with your, other individuals within the office and make that a pattern and a habit of, I'm going to help bridge these relationships, okay? Maybe it's a text to your wife or your spouse, right? Your husband or your wife. So this is an example using a personal example like a marathon, running a marathon. And this is a real example. This is our director of certification of the one thing, Les. He did this. He said, okay, I want to run a marathon, okay? We all agree that you can't go out and just say, okay, I'm ready. Where do I start? You've got to have training to do that, like anything else. It's like a plan. It's a program. So starting out, run a marathon. Then you ask yourself, you brainstorm, what do I need to do? You say, work on a diet and a plan. Work on a hydration schedule. Work on a strength program, okay? Select a running regime. Find a compatible running group. Those are all the things that he came up with. Then he said, okay, now what's the one thing I can do to run a marathon such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary, okay? So then he came and he said, okay, it's got to be this one. Select a running regime. So select the running regime. Then he said, okay, now what do I need to do to select a running regime? I can join an upcoming 5K or a 10K. I can practice on hills. I can time block my training schedule. I can check equipment. I can plan my practice routes. So those are just 5 examples. Maybe add 25, but these are just 5 examples so that we can see this whole process of how this works so that you can do this in your own life. So number 1 was time block the training schedule. So you take that over and you say, okay, now I'm going to time block my training schedule. Okay? Are you guys following me with what I'm talking about? It's just really a progression of narrowing the focus. Choose an AM and a PM to weekly dedicate to your training. Okay? Arrange a babysitter for the dog and for your children. Next is get a running watch, coordinate with an experienced running partner or coach, and finally, identify indoor training alternatives when the weather's bad. Okay? So then he said, okay, what's the one thing I can do to time block my training schedule such that by doing it makes everything else easier or unnecessary? And that would be coordinate with an experienced running partner or coach. Now think in terms of that. Remember the domino that we talked about? If you knock it down, then you start going and it goes to a domino that's almost to the moon. Would that coordinate with an experienced running partner or coach? Thinking in terms of the other things that he's having to do and think about, wouldn't that knock down most of those other things? You see what I'm saying? Give me some feedback. Talk to me about that. Does that make sense? Because if you coordinate with a running partner or a coach, they're going to be able to tell you what your regime should be, what kind of watch you should buy, what kind of shoes you need to have, where you should do your hill climbs, all that stuff. So basically, that's the whole idea behind finding that one lead domino that will knock down all the other dominoes. So that's the whole idea behind it. And I would say that's not even far enough, but what do you need to do to coordinate with a running partner or coach? Pick up the phone and call somebody, right? That's really your one thing. That would be that lead domino that would start this whole process of getting to you to a point of being able to run a marathon. Okay? Does that make sense? It's a very simple, none of these are complicated ideas, but it's really about having the realization and thinking in terms of that whenever you're doing your work. Okay? So next, this is the question, what's the one thing I can do such that by doing it makes everything else easier or unnecessary? Now the reality is we've got different areas of our life, right? And these are in priority sequence as well. So you've got your spiritual area of your life, you've got your physical area of your life, you've got your personal area of your life, which means that's put the oxygen on your own, on your face. Okay, so for me what that looks like is the personal area is riding a mountain bike. That lights me up. I love to ride my mountain bike in the morning. And so that's the one thing that I do whenever I talk about an exercise program for 27 minutes, and it becomes really something that's very powerful for me because it helps give me energy throughout the rest of the day. And also I feel like I connect almost in a spiritual way. It's also physically healthy for me. So it actually achieves a lot of different things in my life. So it took me a lot of things to do that. First I tried this group called F3, Faith, Fitness, and Fellowship, and I couldn't get connected to them because I was like, I don't want to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go work out. I needed to find something that would be my one thing that would be something for my physical body. Does that make sense as far as finding those one things in those different 7 areas of your life? And the nice thing is you don't want to do it all at one time. You're really trying to just find it and make it progressive. That's why we were saying today we're going to find just one of those areas to focus on that you can go away from, and you can have a plan that it's something that you're committed to that will actually help you in a lot of different ways. So if you think about it, this line is not, goes straight through here because all the items on the other side are your personal area of your life. And then on the other side are more on your professional area. So key relationships is split in half because you both have personal relationships like your spouse and your children or your family, but you also have key relationships in your practice. Maybe you've got people that are, subcontractors around, work that gets done in the practice, cleaners or whatever. But there's other people there, the people that are vendors and service providers to you, your office. So those are also key relationships. People in the practice that you're actually working with day in and day out. Those are key relationships that you want to make sure that you know how to cultivate and make those even better. So what are some ahas or things that we've talked about so far that really help you think in terms of, okay, this is something that maybe I haven't thought about before, or feedback that you'd like to share? Or even share, if you'd like, on what you're wanting your 2019 vision to look like. You don't have to, but if you feel comfortable doing it, I'd love to hear it. This is called the pregnant silence. That made it feel better. If anybody would like to, seeing none, we're going to keep moving. Okay, so eliminate the pressures that lead to burnout. Okay, so another client of mine that I was working with, and he went through a workshop that I teach about the One Thing workshop to help him actually find and define what his purpose statement was. Well, he is also a business owner like you are, okay, but he was in a financial advisor role. So he had a client base of a lot of different people that he wanted to continue serving, but he wanted to transition. He wanted to live his life, and as he said, the twilight years of his life better than he did the years before. So what he ended up doing was he reverse engineered, we worked together on this, what he wanted his life to look like. And he said, I've got to be able to retire in 2 years. So his name was David, and he did the workshop, and he worked backwards on a retirement plan in 2 years that got him to a place of now what he's doing is he loves photography, and he's actually good at photography, but he started taking photography courses in Shanghai and doing photography over there, advanced photography courses. He loved being with his wife, and they would get together with family members and other people that they could spend time with. They had a lot of couples that they would travel around internationally with. And he actually is doing missions work in Africa as well. That's something that lights him up, that makes him passionate. So that's how he's doing the twilight years of his life to live and realize what it is in his life's purpose. So we're going to do an exercise about how this works. So what is it in an iceberg? How much is sticking above the water? Does anybody have any ideas on that? Who said it? 10%. Excellent. Yes. Depending on the salinity of the water and the density of the ice and all those other factors, it's really about 10%. This is true of an individual or a practice. So your office is going to be the same thing. If you have a very clear, defined purpose on the bottom, that's what you have to be able to push the thing out of the top, which is what everybody else sees, just like an iceberg. So purpose determines what your priorities are. If you have clarity of purpose, and we're going to create a purpose statement, you can actually know what priorities to say yes and what to say no to, okay? And then what people actually see in the world is your productivity, how productive you are. So that's what everybody else sees of an organization or of an individual. And then at the top of that is how much profit you make. Again, it's clarity of focus on knowing what to say yes, what to say no to. You become more productive. That generates more profits. And at the very pinnacle of that is impact, okay? The impact that you're leaving in the world. That's what that looks like. So we're going to create a purpose statement very quickly, and this is probably the fastest that you'll ever do a purpose statement because I've done a lot of them, but it actually helps you get to a place of knowing what to say yes and no to. And just to be clear with everybody, how many of you married your spouse on the first date? Did anybody do that? No? Okay. That's the same thing with a purpose statement. A purpose statement is meant to really create something that you can date. Okay? Go on a date with your purpose statement. So what we're going to talk about is you have to use the 80-20 to make it work for you. You have to have clarity of purpose, and following are the steps we're going to do that, and it's going to be a short phrase. So if you would, and I did this just so that you could have it all up here. It's on your app as well. So if you want to do that, you can continue this process. But I'd like for you to quickly list 5 specific activities that you love to do. 5 specific activities that you love to do. That means it's not just things that have anything to do with time. It's things that bring you joy. So, for example, and just jot whatever comes down. Maybe you like to make children smile, transform someone's self-image because you love the way they light up after they've gotten their teeth fixed and they really have something that, you know that they feel good about themselves. Teach at the dental school. Maybe that's one of your passions that you'd like to go back and teach and give what you've learned, later on in life. For me, like I said, riding my bike. That's something that fascinates me. Dennis out there at one of the tables I was talking, he shared that as well. So ignite your child's imagination. These are just some examples. Traveling overseas with my family. For me, facilitating a transformation group. I love doing what we're doing right now. This is an activity that I absolutely love. Most people would rather be cut than they would like to stand up and do speaking. But I love to help people and generate those things that make them think and change their outcomes in life. So that's the Coach Others to Live a Life of Passion and Purpose. So I'll give you just a couple of seconds, jot 5 or so things down, and then we'll move on. Next, we're going to do the same things with outcomes. So again, I'd like for you to come from your heart, not your head. Okay? I'd like for you to just list 5 outcomes that you want to see in the world that you're passionate about. Okay? It could be related to your work, your family, your community, the planet, people in another country, whatever that looks like. Okay? Just start writing about 5 things down that you want to see. Like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. So, like, number 1 ranked dental office. Maybe that's what you want to be in customer service because you want to serve your community at the highest level. Maybe it's no children going hungry in your community. Okay? Maybe it's run a marathon of more fulfilling marriage. Maybe it's answering the question, why am I here? Maybe that's what you want to do, what you want to find out. Maybe that's an outcome in your life. Okay? To get clarity around that. Maybe it's helping your children live a life of no regrets. Okay? Whatever that looks like, I want you to think in terms of those 5 different things that are outcomes that you're passionate about. Okay? Who needs more time? So again, you guys can keep doing this as you leave because this is a great opportunity to be in a beautiful place like this to think in terms of how this is so you can continue this exercise. But next, I'd like for you to take a look at each one, the activity and also the outcome. And what I'd like for you to do is circle 1 from each list, just 1, okay? I know it's sometimes going to be hard to make that decision, but we're forcing it to a place of priority, which means 1. Take your rational brain off saying that this is what I have to do to make money, because that's not what the point is. It's really more around your passion about what you love, what really you're created to do. Okay? Next, we're going to go to this. It's a lot of words here, but I wanted you to have this to be able to see what's in the app and not having to go back and switch back and forth. So now answer the question, what's the one thing I can do in my life that would mean the most to me in the world such that by doing it, everything else would be easier or unnecessary? Okay? What's the one thing I can do in my life that would mean the most to me in the world such that by doing it would make everything easier or unnecessary? Okay, so you're going to be putting together your activity that you circled and your outcome that you circled. Okay? So it will look like this. My purpose is to outcome through activity. Or my purpose is to activity to accomplish outcome. Okay? So a couple examples of that. It might be combining the two, right? So it looks like my purpose is to create a highly profitable dental practice that runs on autopilot. Maybe that's your purpose. So again, what you're doing is creating a highly profitable dental practice that runs on autopilot. So that's an activity that creates an outcome. Okay? Or it might be to become the #1 practice in customer delight. Okay? And that's the way you do that is by empowering your team members in their strengths. Okay? We're talking about developing a team. So maybe that's your purpose statement. Might be building marriages by teaching newlyweds financial literacy. That's an actual a dentist that I've worked with. That's his desire because he's really at the end of his career and he wants to do something to give back. So that's his new purpose statement now. Wasn't his purpose statement starting out. Like I said, it's not written in stone. Next, you can ask, this is a way to validate that. So you can ask a close friend, family member, someone that's trusted, someone that's a safe person, what do you think my purpose is? Okay? And if you do that, what happens is you actually have the opportunity to get feedback from other people that see, oh, wow, this is who this person is. This is how they come across to them, and you know, how you show up in the world. So, and if you want to use the feedback that they give you, and again, all this is in the app. This is all there. And if you want me to email it to you, I'm happy to do that as well and how to go about this process. But if you like what the feedback that they give you, go ahead and revise your purpose statement with that. So congratulations, because you've actually created a very powerful purpose statement where your activity and your outcome is something that you're passionate about seeing to happen in the world and what you love to do. So for example, my purpose statement would be, I love to train, or I train. My purpose is to train the One Thing workshop to help people reach their passion and purpose in life. So that's what I do. That's what lights me up. So what ahas do you guys have that you care to share? Or do you have a purpose statement that you think that you've cobbled together to say, you know what, I'm willing to share this and I don't feel uncomfortable with it because I know it's not perfect? Who has something they'd like to share? Who has something they'd not like to share? Who wouldn't say anything if I said, I've got a $10,000 check up here and I'll give it to you right now? For coming to the... Okay. That's cool. It's fine to do this at home. I know a lot of people that are introverts like to think about things. They like to meditate on things. So that's a good way to do this, okay? It is something that's important. So we're going to move on to the next module, increasing your team effectiveness. Increasing your team effectiveness. Now, who are some of your team members? Can you just give me some ideas on, oral, dental hygienist, or who are the people that you consider your team? Okay. Assistants. Yeah. Who else? Sorry? Office manager. Okay, great. Who else? Administrators. Excellent. Who else? Other team members. One thing I wanted to share, and I did this intentionally, is your team is also those people on your personal side. So your spouse, your children, we talk about Team Cashion at our house. We can't do that because that's not supporting the other members of our team, in our family. So you can look at it in terms of your family. It could be a nonprofit that you're working with, or, the GDA. If you're on the board and you're doing things locally or one of the districts or something like that, those are also your team members. So this can apply on any level. It can apply in your practice, in a leadership role that you have at your church, or it could be in your own family. It's creating team effective. How do you create buy-in? How do you create more camaraderie and positivity within that organization or within that team? Okay, that's what we're going to talk about. And I'm going to give you an example of, so like I said, it works anywhere. So I'm going to use an example outside of dentistry. And I worked with the Lake Norman YMCA, the executive director. His name was Ben Penniger. And so he quoted this. This is a quote that I've used of his, what I love, is he said, before we talked and before we co-created this strategy together, we had a kindergarten soccer model. So like everybody on his 15-member leadership team would run around and they would try to put out all the fires that were existing in the organization. And everybody was focused on that particular whatever problem that was. But he said once we did the one thing, what we started doing was we had one thing thinking. So even though we had we co-created a very clear purpose statement around what he was wanting to accomplish at his particular venue, at the Lake Norman YMCA, and then everybody lined up within that, okay? And so what it ended up doing was and I'll show you a picture of it. Well, I'll get onto it, but it basically ended up getting him to a place of tripling his metrics. So he increased team engagement and what the people enjoyed doing. They got more members as a result of it. And third, they actually were able to increase their reserves, which basically means profits for a nonprofit, for their reserves that went back to the greater Charlotte area. And if you think about it, it's just like the experience. So the GDA is going to be here next year, which didn't surprise me because the Ritz-Carlton, you may be familiar with, and I asked for one of them, their mission statement and their credo and everything else that they all walk around with. So you think about your own practice coming up with a vision statement or a purpose statement that everybody knows and is crystal clear on, and then they've got all this here that they talk about. And the basically overall motto is, we're ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. So that's very empowering. If you think about it, if you treat someone and they feel like they're being treated like the cleaning lady or the janitor or something like that, even if they are the cleaning lady and the janitor, if you treat them at a higher level, which I know you do, but thinking in terms of that, how do I help empower this person and get them to buy into what we're doing and engage them with the goals and the purpose of our practice? That's the way to increase team effectiveness, because everybody's bought into it and it's in writing. So there's a lot of crystal clarity around it, just like what you did for your individual purpose statement. So we go on to talk about that. The laws of productivity is, and I'm going to do this exercise. So am I balanced right now? Would you say I'm balanced? Yeah? Do what? Didn't fall over, so I'm balanced. Is that a good, yeah? So here's what I'd offer to you is I'm actually not balanced, but if you look at my feet, if you look at my foot, my ankles and my knees and my foot are actually twitching, the muscles in there to keep me balanced. So I'm actually in the act of balancing. So it's a little misnomer, or actually we say a live productivity of a balanced life, because you can never perfectly balance your life. If you really lived a perfectly balanced life, this is what it would look like. You would say, okay, I'm at work. Okay, my wife just called. I need to leave this patient in the chair. I'm going to get that phone call. Okay, somebody just emailed me. I just hung up the phone. I answered that that email message. Okay, that person was still in the chair. I haven't finished up with them. Let's get that taken care of. Oh, there's a vendor that's outside. I need to talk to them. And you're going crisscrossing back and forth. That is work-life balance in the middle. Or you could look at an extreme man of work-life balance. What that looks like is, okay, I'm going to work for basically a whole week, and I'm not even going to see my family. I'm going to spend my time at the office. I'm going to sleep on the sofa in the office, and then I'm going to wake up and do the work, and I'm going to work until 9 o'clock and go to sleep and then wake up the next day. Then the next week, I'm going to take off for a full week, and I'm going to have a vacation with my family. That's work at the extremes, work-life balance at the extremes. So neither one of those obviously works, right? The whole idea is we want to have connection. We want to have a relationship with people, but we also want to get work done. We want to be focused. So the way that it works the best is if you can think in terms of working on the extremes and going long with work. So what I mean by that is, this is what it looks like. Within your life, you want to have short accounts. You want to have connections with your spouse, your other doctors in your office in the practice, the people that you have as your team. Those relational things, those personal levels, that's what we want to always be touching. Not letting those relationships kind of get old or not really celebrating them, not guarding them. But on the work side, you want to have as much time as you can to have a time block to be able to get something done. And one of the things that they've talked about, you might have heard of the 10,000 rule. Whenever you actually have a period of getting to a place of mastery, if you think about it in 5 years, if you do 4 hours a day, that gets to that place of about 10,000 hours to where you've actually gained mastery. You've probably done that as dental professionals at that level and more, okay? So that's where you achieve that. And that's the idea behind having a chunk or a time block of whatever you're doing, whatever that outcome is that you're trying to accomplish, that you try to create a lot of space for that, where you're not trying to multitask or do other things in that particular period of time. So these are the areas that we're talking about in your spiritual life. And I think I shared those that, I shared with you some of the ones that I do, like my spiritual life. I actually have that quiet time in the morning, and I have a journal. I read the Bible, and I also have 10 minutes of meditation. For my physical health, I ride my mountain bike in the morning. And for my personal life, that actually is riding a mountain bike too, because that lights me up. That gives me energy. That jazzes me. It's something I love to do in the woods. And then with my key relationships, I have my leading ladies, so my wife and my 2 daughters, my 4-year-old and my 7-year-old. And I have one-on-one daddy-daughter dates. And I text my wife, not consistently daily. I'm trying to get to the place of being daily with that, on just a word of encouragement. It might be a scripture verse. Something that encourages her and lets her know that I'm thinking about her, that I love her. The next one is for my job is I focus on 1 call a day to my Dream 100. So whether it be someone that might be an executive director at, like Frank, reaching out to him. He was one of my 1 calls. That's why I'm standing before you today. And then also I did an article for the North Carolina Dental Society about counterbalancing work-life stress. And I'm working with the UNC Dental School about doing programs within the UNC Dental School to help them and helping people that are graduating as well as alums, creating that work-life balance, okay? So that's an example of those in the job. For my business, it's about developing a funnel, okay? It's lead generation, okay? You need to know how are you going to get your business. Just like you do, if the practice is the best absolutely in the world, but you're not getting people that are there that know, like, and trust you and want to pay to take your services and do your treatment plans, then you're going to go out of business, right? So that's on the business level. So that would be your practice. So your job is really what you do as a practitioner, and then for the business is the practice. Next, for your finances, okay? Maybe you want to retire. You want to figure out what that's going to look like, right, Paul? And, moving on to what is my next purpose in life? What am I going to be doing after I kind of slow down or whatever? So that's an example of how you're going to do that with your finances. And for me, that's using Dave Ramsey. I'm a big fan of his and actually facilitate that. So this is a quote from James Patterson, Suzanne's diary for Nicholas. Let's look at this together. Imagine life is a game in which you're juggling 5 balls. The balls are called work, family, health, friends, and integrity. And you're keeping all of them in the air. But one day you finally come to understand that if you drop the rubber ball, that work is a rubber ball, and if you drop it, it will bounce back. The 4 other balls, family, health, friends, integrity, are made of glass. If you drop them, they will either be irrevocably scuffed, nicked, perhaps even shattered. So that's what we want to think in terms of doing those things daily around those areas that are really those crystal balls, those glass balls that could shatter with your health, your friends, your integrity, and your family. So again, we're going to talk about developing a purpose statement. We're going to talk about using your purpose statement, and we're going to move forward with what it will do to get you to where you want to go. So individuals with written goals and organizations, 39.5% more likely to succeed. If you have individuals with written goals and weekly accountability, they're 76.7% likely to achieve them, to be successful. So you can think about getting an accountability partner. Okay, that's what I have, or a coach. I also have coaches to help you make sure that you're doing what you need to do, that you're not lying to yourself, okay, and telling yourself a story around what it is that you really want to accomplish in life so that you're making steps to get there, okay? So what is the definition of a team? I love Wikipedia's example of that. It's a group of individuals working together to achieve a goal. A group doesn't necessarily constitute a team. So you might be saying my staff, but you might not have literally that team dynamic where everybody is for each other, and you're actually doing the second part of that. Teams normally have members with complementary skills, right, that generate synergy through a coordinated effort which allows each member to maximize their strengths and minimize their weaknesses. That's the idea behind a team. And that's how you create team effectiveness, is you have conversations around that and making that work. So this was Ben. I mentioned him earlier on, but he talked about team engagement, transformation of his 15-member leadership team from the kindergarten soccer model that went to new one thing thinking. Their sales, their membership growth was at a 4-year all-time high. The profits, the capital reserves were at an all-time high. And this was a result of driving key metrics through purpose. That was what he said. That was his quote below. And I thought it was amazing to see what his team was able to do by engaging their purpose. So you engage not only the purpose at the level of an office level, okay, but you also engage those people on their purpose within. And that's what drives people. People are driven by emotion. We take action based on emotion. We typically use our logical mind, like we're like, I love that car. Now how do I convince myself that that's a good opportunity to buy that car, or why I should buy that car, or whatever that looks like for you, going on that vacation, whatever it is. It's typically an emotional thing that draws us to make that choice. And so putting the one thing to work in your personal life, your family, your job, your work team, a nonprofit that you work with, the GDA or whatever, or at your school. Like if you're over an organization of a school, there's my beautiful family. And this is a GPS that we're going to co-create together, okay? And you can just take some notes on it, write some ideas down, but you've got this as a PDF within the app, so you can use this later. But first we identify an annual goal, okay? We complete a brain dump exercise, just like we did on the extreme Pareto. Remember how we put a bunch of ideas down? Then what we do is we apply Pareto's principle, okay, by asking the focusing question. You remember the focusing question? It's the heart of the book. What's the one thing I can do such that by doing it makes everything else easier or unnecessary, right? And then next, you identify 3 priorities. So you're going to get a chance to see what this looks like, okay? Just 3. So you've got 1 annual goal, you've got 3 priorities, and then you have 5 strategies underneath each priority. So it's a very simple 1-page document that anybody in the practice can understand and be clear on about where we're going within the practice, okay? So you ask that focusing question to line up those dominoes. Remember how we saw the picture of the dominoes that went and did the hockey stick where it goes up to the moon? That's the idea. Then you also help people, encourage them to be accountable by who and by what date, okay? So obviously things can move around, things can change. We have flexibility and we can give grace to people, but at the same time, a deadline and also a clear area of responsibility that someone is responsible for, that is what will help people, okay? So this is a GPS, and like I said, I've got that. Just as you use your GPS in your car, you can do it within your business, your practice, or within your life. So you can use this both for yourself personally, to use a GPS, or you can use it within your practice. So first is the priority to achieve your first you clarify what that goal looks like for whatever that 1-year period is. Okay, next, you create the priorities, what we talked about before, and you put all 3 priorities out and then 5 strategies under each one. So that's what gives absolute clarity for everyone in the practice to be able to know, okay, this is where we're going with this. And you've got them engaged as a team because they've helped do this process. So you can go back and facilitate this within one of your staff meetings, your office meetings, whatever, to be able to get everybody on the same page, okay? And de-stressing so that you can retire is figuring out a plan maybe for yourself to say, what does that need to look like? And let me put a plan in place to do that. Does that make sense? Yeah? So this is all very simple stuff. I know this is not anything like rocket science or anything like that. And I don't want it to sound like there's any way that I'm talking down to you, but it's really about seeing how these things can come together and synergistically accomplish what you're looking to accomplish within your practice and within your life, okay? Again, being present is that intentionality and keeping that in front of you and using accountability around what does it look like for me to be present with my family? And sometimes it means, or your coworkers or wherever you are that you're talking about that, is how do I be present within these particular areas that I know I'm not really being present in? And I can ask them and say, hey, does it feel like I'm present with you right now? A lot of times you can get feedback from that person. They say, no, I didn't feel like you were. And you can say, well, look, I'm sorry. I felt like I was thinking about what I needed to do tomorrow or whatever that looks like. So a lot of times communication, whenever you're talking about a team effectiveness, is really just asking. And then a lot of times my wife and I will have arguments. Imagine that. Does anybody have arguments with their spouse? Some? Okay. So I'm glad. I need to listen to you guys. But I do have arguments with my spouse. And what happens is we actually instituted something with, it just happened to be the thing that was closest to us. It was a plastic knife. Okay? And we think about knives cutting ourselves. And that's what happens whenever you say things that are hurtful to another person. So it's kind of ironic that we used a knife to do this. But we would trade it back and forth. And until I could and you might have heard this in Covey, but it's about seeking first to understand, then be understood. And I actually did some co-facilitation around the Covey principles too, the 7 habits of highly effective people. But we would actually trade the knife back and forth, and the only way you could give it to someone is if you felt heard. So if I said, okay, Amanda, what you're saying is that you feel like you'd rather be present. You want to be present with these relationships that you're thinking about. And you would say yes. Then I would give you the knife. Then you would give me the knife, and I would be able to say my piece and say, well, Amanda, I don't feel like you're hearing me. So what I'm saying is that I feel like we could have a better engagement and conversation if we were able to talk more, more frequently. You see what I'm saying? Does that make sense? And then once you rephrase that back to me, Audie, what you feel is blah, 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 what I just said in your terms, then I'll give the knife back to you, and avoids really crazy arguments that you end up hurting each other, saying things that you really didn't mean to say only because you were angry and mad and you wanted to get even. Not that anybody would do that, but yeah. You're smiling. Is that true? Not really? You don't do that? Well, that's good. Y'all need to be doing. I don't need to be doing this. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Does anybody have that experience? Maybe I'm the only one. So I'm glad that you don't have that. What were you talking about when you were talking about being present?
Well, I love the plastic knife analogy to make sure that you're understood,
Mm-hmm.
because I do get that. I don't see as much of the getting even or the spiteful attitude in my relationships.
That's great. That's super. I love
But
that.
I do like that about being understood.
Because you feel like you can have more connection to that person and being more intentional. That's great. Okay, excellent. Reducing stress with others. That same technique that we talked about, Will, does that work for you as far as like the idea of even in the practice say, hey, can we just try this exercise? I know this sounds kind of dorky, but I feel like we can maybe have a conversation around what this is. Would that help you, do you think? Yeah? Okay, excellent. Was there anything else around reducing stress with others that we want to address as far as it relates to team dynamics?
I think the examples that you gave were great. More to, I guess, talk to people who are around me in that same conversation to help if they're experiencing any kind of stress. And then I feel like that would only benefit the stress in my life too.
Absolutely.
Because I feel like from where I'm coming from, I feel like the stress of people who I have close in my life, that weighs heavier on me too. So that's just one thing I think by using some of the ideas that you talked about today might help others too.
Okay.
By just kind of sharing the knowledge too.
And Will brings out an excellent point, and I'd forgotten to ask this of you. I would ask that you, when you come out of this training, think in terms of, or as you're sitting here, who can I actually teach this to? Because that's whenever it solidifies the learning experience. Whenever you actually think and learn for another person, you actually can help by sharing that information, but it also helps you be more accountable to yourself. So that's a good point. Excellent point. The final thing is reducing stress with patients. Paul, is that Paul, right? Yeah. Is that something that you think where would that apply? Where would the principles that we've talked about apply to helping reduce stress? Like not feeling so harried, or I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
I guess it's the way of sharing. Sharing the stress. And when I say that, it's to say, okay, it's stressful for me. It's stressful for you. And for them to, take another breath.
okay. If I can help, I want to do that because I want to help with the clarity around what you're saying so I can make sure if there's things that I know that I can help share. But what you're saying, what I think I heard you say is like if someone's in a chair and they're stressed out, then it also kind of like, and if you're stressed out, then it really escalates. Everybody's stress builds on each other. So that doesn't feel good. So it's like, how do I de-stress myself so that I also can be a positive influence for not causing more stress in there? Yeah, that's a great point, a great goal. Yeah. So does your team chart match the GPS? So again, we want to help people be accountable and be clear on what the outcomes are. So that is where that is. So I think we've shared ahas. Are there other ahas or things that you'd like to, questions that you have? We're going to do question and answer or ahas around what you've just learned. Who has anything? So my question or my point is, you're the first domino. So if there's some area of your life that's not working at the level that you want, you're that lead domino. You're that 1-2-inch domino that's going to knock the other ones down that will get you almost to the moon. And so I want to encourage you I'm a resource. If I can serve you or help you in any way, if you want to come up afterwards, whatever that looks like, feel free to do so. I'd like to give 3 of the One Thing books away. If you want to put a card in, or if somebody wants to, I don't know how any other way to do it. And do y'all have, I don't know that dental practitioners have cards. Do y'all do cards a lot or whatever? I'm happy to, actually, let me do this. If someone wants to take one, feel free to do that because it's a great book. I was talking to a dentist last Tuesday, and she said it was the first book that I read this year, and here's what it did. It helped me with my focus in my relationships and in my practice, and I'm going to bring you in because I want to help you to help my team to gain that same level of focus. So feel free to grab one of these if you like. That's why I brought them. And if there's no other questions, thank you guys for coming, and I've enjoyed being with you today. If you need anything, I've got some business cards I'll put up here too, and you're welcome to take those and ask me if I can serve you in any way I want to do that. So thank you all.